Good afternoon. The purpose of this video is one of possibly a series of videos. I wanted to look at some aspects of Scottish football history with some relevance to today and how we can possibly learn some interesting lessons from the past. If we go back to the 14th of March 1960, a man called John Steen became manager of Dunfermline Athletic. It was the first job he'd had as a manager, and of course several years later, better known as Jock, he became a legendary figure at Celtic. But March 1960, 14th, he became the manager of Dunfermline. Dunfermline at that time were in the old Scottish First Division, which those of us of a certain age may well remember. Scottish football had two divisions. There was 18 in the first, the top division, the first division, and 19 in the second division. And that particular season, 1960, March 1960, Dunfermline were not doing at all well. 28 matches had been played. It was in the days when you get 2 points for a win and 1 for a draw. And with 6 matches to go, Dunfermline were sitting second bottom. That was the points total. If you recall that, Arbroath were at the foot of the table with 15 points, having played 28 games. Dunfermline, also 28 games, were on 17 points. And the team above them, third bottom, was Aberdeen, who had played 1 game less and had 20 points. So things weren't looking good for Dunfermline. 28 matches played, they had only managed to win 4. 6 matches left, looked as if they were going to be relegated. Well, the rest, as they say, is history. Dunfermline won their last 6 games, all of them. One of the teams they played, ironically, was Celtic, but they won the last 6 games of that season and escaped relegation relatively comfortably. It's worth hypothesising that if Dunfermline had been relegated, had the league stopped on the 14th of March 1960 with 6 games to go, and Dunfermline had therefore been relegated as one of the 2 teams to go down, the history of the club would have been significantly different, because they had a very good decade in the 60s. They won the Scottish Cup the following year, 1961. They won the Scottish Cup again in 1968, and they actually reached the semi-finals of the old Cup Winners' Cup in 1969 when they lost to Slovan Bratislava. So they had something of a peak period in their history, and that relegation, had it taken place, would have certainly put paid to that. Turn the clock forward to 2020, or season specifically 2019 to 2020, which was COVID season. And the Scottish Premier League, SPL, decided to stop the competition on the 4th of March. At that point in time, at the top of the table this time, that was the story. Celtic had played 30 matches, Rangers had played 29, 1 fewer. We're now into 3 points for a win, of course, and 1 for a draw. Celtic had 80 points, Rangers had 67, so they'd played 29 games, 67 points. It was a strong lead. Nobody thought that Rangers would overtake that lead, which is fair enough. It didn't look very likely. But there were still 8 games to go in Celtic's case and 9 games to go in Rangers' case. And 2 of those games would be Old Firm derbies, where they'd play one another, where anything could happen. So it was far from certain, although highly likely, that Celtic would win the league. Yet, what happened? They were handed the league. Now, I'm not aware if there's any occasion in Scottish football history where a team has been handed the league title without the season being completed, but that's what happened. There were options. They could have held the remaining matches over till the crisis had passed, or until common sense prevailed, or even played matches as they eventually did behind closed doors. But the season was ended, the title was handed over, 8 games weren't played that could have been played. The reason I mention that, because obviously that was one of Celtic's 9 in a row, in fact it was the 9th, and yet it was a title that was won under not entirely satisfactory circumstances from whichever point of view. Surely if you win a competition, you want the competition to be played out to its full. Football is not short of examples of dramatic last-minute goals and dramatic last-minute surges and dramatic last-minute collapses. These things are the bread and butter of football everywhere. But in 2020, Celtic were handed the league title, and they are a club whose support tend to think that they've been on the receiving end of some challenging decisions throughout the history of the game. Well, not in 2020. They were handed a title, didn't need to happen, could have been played out. From their point of view, it would have been a satisfactory result because they'd played all the matches. But in any event, the game was stopped, the league was stopped, and it's treated as just any other league title. So they certainly were treated rather well in 2020, I would suggest, when you think of the situation Mr. Steen was in all these years before. Thank you very much.